What is up, guys? Welcome to another episode of The Meaning of Podcast. I am Ace.
This is RB3.
And this is the podcast where we look into the deeper meaning of your favorite filmmakers' movies. And this episode is going to be a good one, guys, because we're going to count down the top 5 directors of 2017. We've both made a list. We do not know what is on each other's list because we are fair and we are even, and we want to make it a surprise for the podcast, so it's going to be a lot of fun. We're going to be looking at the hottest directors of 2017.
Not like our favorites, but
not necessarily our favorites, because there's some directors that I really enjoyed this year that made great movies that no one saw. What we want to look at mainly, guys, is the directors that made movies that had their clear artistic vision, box office success or some sort of success, and just an impact on 2017 in general, as far as conversation on 2017, cultural impact on 2017, and just what stirred up the most conversation and most dialogue based on movies that they created. So that's what we're going to be doing on this podcast. But before we do that, we're going to jump into the comment section of last week's episode and the previous week's episode, which was our 2 Spielberg episode comments. We're going to be reading your comments, guys, just because we appreciate your comments, and we're going to be reading each and every one of them. Well, actually, probably not each and every one of them, but we do want to read more of your comments, guys, so make sure you leave us comments on the comment section. We appreciate it. That's a great way to support us, too, if you're thinking about supporting us. And we're going to start with part 1 of our Steven Spielberg.
Yeah, part 1, we're starting off hot with Mr. MVR, who writes, do you think Jaws might not have been successful if Spielberg was able to get Bruce the shark to work and place in more shots? Personally, to me, what makes this movie was John Williams' score. It's so simple but creates so much of that tension, and if they showed the shark more, it would have not worked.
Yeah, I 100% agree. I think it's one of those things where sometimes, I think we talked about it on that episode too, is that sometimes when directors have a misfire or something that just doesn't work on set and they have to work around it and adapt to that circumstance, they're able to create something that's even better than what they originally intended, right?
Yeah.
Because not seeing the shark creates more of that fear of like, I don't know what this is, and it's a giant shark, and you imagine the mutant giant shark that you get in the movie. So when you actually get the visuals of the shark, it's even more terrifying. What do you think?
Yeah, no, I think the exact same point you had. Like we talked about in that episode. It's like calling the industry like happy accidents, right? Like it's something on set falls apart, or you see something different because of like the circumstances that you have. Luckily, that worked out great for Jaws. It created one of the most suspenseful movies of all time, and I think that's, I mean, again, that's also a testament to how Spielberg was as a director, being that young, going into a big budget, not big budget, but
bigger movie.
Big movie coming off. That's like your second feature, and you're adapting like this big, like best-selling book. But he was able to make it work, and he was able to tell the story with make it more of a human story to begin with. And even though Jaws is the main like antagonist, you really stay in that movie for the characters, and I think that's really a good testament to.
And he also mentioned the Williams score, which is so true. It's so iconic, and people already. I mean, he talked about it in his documentary, talking about how amazing that score is and how it basically drove that movie just as much as the visuals did. Right. And that's what a great score can do. So yeah, appreciate the comment. I'm gonna read one right here from Martin Bridger on part 2 of Spielberg, which is his historical fiction. He says, RB3 is correct. One of the most interesting things about War Horse is that it's set during World War I, which is a war we don't see enough in film. He's basically saying that you made a good point.
Yeah. I mean,
World War I is something we don't. World War II we hear a lot about, but World War I we kind of don't.
Yeah, I mean, Wonder Woman was World War I, and that's the big superhero movie now. The main reason why is because like I guess World War II is more to rally behind, right? It's like a clear antagonist where like you're fighting Nazis and Japanese, like that's the 2 main American opponents. So and like everything in World War I, it's a little more ambiguous. It's like even historians, it kind of comes down to like what origin of the war kind of started, and there's not really a specific clear. I mean, there's a clear like thing that sparked it, but you know what I mean? Like it's not like
It's not as it's black and white as like
exactly.
Nazis.
Yeah.
Like when you say Nazis, you're like, oh, evil.
Yeah.
Kill the evil. Nazis are evil.
But it's not as cinematic as like Vietnam though, because we see a
Oh,
lot of
true.
Vietnam movies, but a lot of the filmmakers that we're familiar with grew up during the Vietnam War period, so they're more familiar with that stuff.
That's true. It's also like an age thing, right? Because
Yeah.
World War One was so long ago
Yeah.
that probably there's not a lot of like, I don't know, visual stuff behind it. Whereas like
Yeah.
World War Two, there's a ton of footage of that. Same with Vietnam and all that. So that's a good point too. I know. What's crazy about World War One as well is that studying World War One in school, I remember hearing about like the trench warfare,
Yeah.
and hear about like the gas and stuff like that, and hearing about like it's still one of the most terrifying wars in history, in the history of the world, because of like the usage of gas, like they used gas like all the freaking time,
Right.
and the craziness of like trench warfare, where it was just like you were basically in a pile of people and you were just trying to kill each other in like in the most vicious way you could. So
Right.
it's a pretty hardcore war.
Yeah, yeah.
So
no
that's a
doubt.
very interesting point. Do you have another one?
Yeah, this is one coming from Laura. You know, Laura H.
Yeah,
Hawthorne,
Laura.
a very, very frequent commenter. We appreciate you, Laura. She says, this might have been my favorite episode because I've watched all the films you discussed, well, besides 1941. And being an 80s and 90s kid does have a strong emotional connection to several of them. Having said that, I'm with RB3 when it comes to Hook. I saw it in theaters, and Peter Pan is my favorite all-time animated Disney film. But man, did I not like any aspect of his reinterpretation. I'm with Ace, though, about the ending of Jurassic Park. Fist pumping all the way. And she also put, for your information, the book The War of the Wars is actually a novella, and it's the best version of that story in any media. Worth the read.
Cool. Thank you. Yeah, we appreciate everyone who listens throughout the entire episode and
Yeah.
gets to hear a little bit of our points. Obviously, if you want to skip around, that's fine as well. But if you want to hear our full thoughts on certain things, we definitely recommend listening to the full episode, which is what you should do in a podcast. But if you
Right.
don't, it's fine. So yeah, that's great.
Hook,
Any
though,
comments you have?
Yeah, I mean, Hook is something that I didn't really care about.
Yeah.
We both didn't really care about
That's
that
because
much.
I
but
think mainly it's because I didn't necessarily grow up with it.
Yeah.
Whereas like I grew up with other things.
Yeah,
It's-
Jurassic Park was.
Yeah, and it's
yeah.
funny because it sounds like I would have grown up with it because it came out during that time of like where I'm like a child.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I'm like, yeah, I think I was a little too little for Hook. I
Yeah.
think is what the issue was for me.
Yeah,
So
but-
I never really connected to
It's
it.
funny, people. I mean, she obviously says she saw it when she was a kid and she didn't like it either.
Yeah.
So it's like, it's crazy. I mean, I don't know. I mean, but Jurassic Park obviously does have a very uplifting,
Sure.
kind of more family friendly, I guess, approach. Like not the same level as Hook, but it's a little more mature than that.
Sure.
But it's like it can still appeal to like a younger generation.
I think it really is the fascination with dinosaurs. Like for some reason, there's something about kids that goes together with dinosaurs in a weird way,
Yeah.
which I've always found kind of odd if you really think about it.
Yeah.
It's kind of weird that kids are really into giant creatures that eat people.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
kids love that stuff, and it's something that as a kid myself scared me initially.
Yeah.
But then I was like, man, this is really cool. Like I remember the first like I talked about it on the episode, but I said like my favorite was the raptors. Like I
Yeah.
loved the velociraptors were so cool.
Right.
And my brother liked the T-Rex, and it was like that kind of back and forth that we had of like liking it. We had a ton of toys, like dinosaur toys. I don't know if you ever
Yeah.
had those, but like dinosaur toys were like everything back in the 90s because of Jurassic Park.
Yeah.
So I think it really is that fascination with creatures that were literally larger than life.
Yeah.
So that's cool. Let's read another comment from part 2. I'm going to mispronounce your name. Ibrahim Hamid says, hi, Ace and RB3. First of all, I have seen almost all your podcasts. I really love the content. I'm looking forward to seeing your future episodes. Keep it up. Finally, I wonder if there's any way I can support your show. Have a nice day. Thank you, Ibrahim. For now, the way you can support our show, I mean, RB3 can correct me, but honestly, watching the show, commenting on the show, liking it,
Yeah.
we're definitely still starting out, so we're not like big podcasters. I mean, as you can tell, we've only done not as many episodes, considering there's other podcasts that have like hundreds of episodes.
Right.
So our main thing is growth. Our main thing is like talk about us to your friends. Mention us in different conversations. Share it if you want to share it.
Yeah.
And just continue watching, supporting that each and every episode, even if it's not your favorite director we're talking about. Because I think that's the thing we're kind of running into is that certain directors are bigger than other directors and can hit bigger audiences, and yet we're probably still going to keep talking about the directors we want to talk about because we have appreciation for them. So even if you don't know the director we're talking about, go ahead and listen to our show. That's the best way to support us, guys.
Yeah, Alexander Payne.
Alexander Payne, man.
Guillermo del Toro.
Hey, man.
That's also a thing,
What are you Alexander Payne fans?
Yeah, Alexander Payne fans. Come on, man. Sideways is great.
There's like 10 people. They're like, I like him.
Nebraska. No. Hey, listen. Also, sorry for the mic. Supports on iTunes, too. You know what I mean? Download on iTunes. That really helps out our numbers. If we get enough downloads on iTunes, we can maybe get some ads, some money in our pockets. You know, we broke. I'm broke. I don't know about you.
I'm broke as hell.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a college student. I'm at USC. Come on, give me a job, people. I don't know.
I'm super broke.
Yeah, we gotta get paid. So download on iTunes, support us on YouTube, like and comment, all that stuff. You know.
It really is. We really do appreciate each and every one of you guys. And if the more you guys show interest, even if we're talking about directors that you might not know about or you might not care about, it's probably the best way to support us, and we do appreciate you guys. And now we're going to get into the conversation that we've come here for, which is the top 5 directors of 2017. What we're going to do, guys, is we're going to count down 5 through 1. So basically, RB3 will say his number 5, I'll say my number 5, and then we'll talk, etc., etc. Make sure you leave us your top 5 directors of 2017. And remember, guys, we're mainly talking about the impact of 2017. So obviously, there's some directors from indie movies that I really love, but again, they probably won't be on my list considering that not a lot of people saw those movies. I want to talk about the directors that had a great year based on artistic vision, success, and impact on 2017, which means when I say artistic vision, I mean like it's not like a Josh Trank situation or like a situation where you can clearly tell the studio made the movie and it let's say it made a lot of money. I want to have a director that clearly made the movie they wanted to make, even if it's a big budget studio movie. So that's what's going to be our list. Let's count down 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Let's do it, guys. Starting at number 5, I'm going to go to Mr. RB3 to go first.
All right.
And you were like, wait, I'm going first? No one told me this. Damn it.
Wait a minute.
What's going on?
Yeah.
Give me your number 5, man, and let me know why you picked him and what you feel that you considered going into this list.
Well, yeah. I mean, you know,
because I think we had different.
I mean, I kind of mixed.
Fine.
I mixed a little more personal into it, like what I see as directors who are stepping up, you know, or maybe like I got a lot of indie people, not necessarily all indie people. I have some big names in there too, but indie people who really made a big splash. In 2017.
It's crazy because I didn't avoid indie people, but I sort of avoided indie people because I kind of went towards more like people who had like big like social media impacts on 2017 and like conversation impacts and stuff. But I'm so curious to hear your list now because ours is probably going to be different then. Yeah.
I mean, it's going to be a little different. So, I mean, just starting off, for example, these are young guys who just came out with their like one of their big features with Robert Pattinson. That's the Safdie brothers. Man.
Oh,
the
nice.
guys who did a Good Time.
Yeah.
And I think these guys are probably, I put them as my number 5 hottest going into 2017 because they made this movie, small independent feature, came out in the middle of August, A24 distributing it, and it just made such a wave. I mean, you know, a lot of the A24 movies make big waves critically and commercially, but this one really like took a little splash and had like a life of its own. I remember it running in theaters for quite some time before they took it out, and I think this movie in particular shows how young filmmakers could still be edgy and daring and like uberly creative while not taking like risk or compromise to their filmmaking. And I think what they have displayed here with Good Time, and I don't want to like spoil the movie in particular, but it's a very tight, tense, unexpected, unpredictable movie. And doing that, you know, we don't see a lot of that kind of artistry in the cinema these days. I mean, recently we've seen like, you know, things like Mother come out that stretch the boundaries a little bit, or some other films that are bringing more of an art house appeal to the mainstream. But this one kind of was mainstream while being a deep, introspective, psychological journey. You know what I mean? So for that reason alone, and as a result of Good Time, they signed on to do the 48 Hours remake. as well. So I mean, to me, they're to me maybe not the hottest, but the most promising directors of
Considering,
2017.
especially
Yeah,
considering the fact that you probably didn't hear about them previous to this movie.
exactly.
That's a very
Yeah,
good point because I mean I didn't know about them,
right,
before this movie, right? So
right.
that's a good point considering that they literally broke onto the scene, whereas like other directors that had their debut films this year, you probably knew about them from other
Yeah,
things, but for
exactly.
them, you probably didn't know about them. And it's crazy because you're right that a lot more people are talking about Good Time.
Hmm.
Correct me if I'm wrong. Wasn't one of the directors in the movie itself?
Yeah, yeah.
And he
The
plays
one
the
of the
brother,
guys.
right? The other
Yeah,
brother.
the brother. Yeah,
He's incredible in the movie too.
yeah,
He's a really
yeah,
good actor. He should do acting as well.
yeah, yeah.
Also, I was thinking about this movie the other day because I'm looking at a lot of top 10 lists of 2017,
Mhm.
which we eventually will be doing, guys. We don't know when, but we will be
We
doing
got a top
in some
10.
sort of form.
Hey, listen, I kind of think, look, we have freedom reign to do the top 10 up until Oscar season. You know what I mean? When the
Yeah,
Oscars hit, we're kind of pushing the deadline a little bit, but
yeah, yeah. I
I
still
mean,
want to do it soon.
yeah, yeah.
But I'm watching a lot of people's top 10 lists, and a lot of people have this in their top 10. Um, And what's crazy for me is that I remember watching this movie when it came out. Like I saw it the weekend of
Hmm.
because I was curious in watching it, and because I was doing an indie movie segment on Schmoes.
Right.
So for me, I was like super curious about this movie because I already heard good things about it in the festival circuit,
Right.
and I went with my buddy. And it's crazy because a lot of people are talking about it with good reason. And the more I think about it, and especially considering that we've just entered award season,
Hmm.
Robert Pattinson, man, in this
Yeah.
movie is
Oh yeah. It's
so good.
unreal.
Almost like almost better than anything we've seen this year. Almost, right? Because we still have Gary Oldman, we still have Daniel
Yeah, I just saw
Day-Lewis.
Phantom Thread. Like,
We still
yeah.
have some
So,
performances that you can be like, he's good, but he's
yeah.
not as good as the monsters
Yeah, he's not
that.
gonna. Yeah, he's not gonna beat Daniel Day-Lewis. And
But
like,
exactly, right? Or Gary Oldman, who's
yeah,
like GOAT.
yeah,
But at the same time, he's still like I would still put him like top 6 performances of the year. I would. I maybe even
yeah,
top 5 of the year as
yeah.
far as like leading male performances of this year. I would
Mhm.
put Robert Pattinson up there.
Oh,
Like
yeah,
he's
I don't
that
disagree.
good. He's
Yeah,
that good in the movie. And honestly, the more I thought about this movie, the more it's crazy how like people's interpretations of the movie haven't been necessarily my interpretation of the movie.
yeah,
Considering that when I saw this movie, I saw it in a very clear way. Like the directors were clearly trying to say one thing,
mm,
and then walking out of it and hearing reviews of it, people were saying things that I did not think at all. But
right,
basically, I'm not, again, we won't spoil it, but basically, I wanted to kill Robert Pattinson's
yeah,
character.
yeah,
I hated his character. I thought he was the devil, man. I
yeah,
thought he was the worst guy ever.
yeah,
And some people were like, he's just like a misunderstood like thug, and I'm like, he's not he's a dick, bro. He should
yeah.
get shot. Like I remember like at the end of the movie, I'm like, I really hope this guy gets shot right now. Like I hate this guy so bad. Because I just think like it's about a guy who's basically making the worst decisions like on top of another, on top of another, on top of another, on top of
Yeah.
another, and it literally spirals. Like you can feel the spiral in the movie,
Mm,
and that's rare when you're just like feeling like you're spiraling down with the character. And
right.
it's crazy because the POV of that movie is a guy that is kind of not a good guy, and in fact, I would say he's an awful guy. But it's such a unique movie in that way, in the sense that it's a very different POV as far as what we usually get. And you're right that they've come pretty far as far as the directors have for sure.
Right, right, right. Yeah, I think that's I think when it comes down to is the fact that they splashed onto the scene with like this gigantic wave, and I think it's so reminiscent of like something like early Scorsese in the sense that a lot of people compare it to Taxi Driver, at least in the style and the way it's executed. And I think not only on top of that, I think that when it comes down to having directors that have such a powerful grasp of the low budget feel and making that feel other like big and epic in its own sense, I think that really leads like I'm not the same kind of movie at all, but like when in 2015 when that movie Cop Car came out with Kevin Bacon and the kid from Mud. Is that yeah? So when when that movie came out, you see the guy John Watts. It's a very low budget film, but he made it feel like a spectacle just from the way it was crafted and directed, and how you use a lot of long shots and make it feel like super spread out. It probably requires a lot more time, but he's very focused on what he was doing. And then he goes on to direct Spider-Man: Homecoming, which a lot of people consider one of the better Marvel movies. So again, when in 2015, you might have not expected to see John Watts on like a hot 5 directors or top 5 directors or whatever. But look where he ends up, and look at how his career is progressing. So
Cool.
it's nothing but exciting for me.
Do you think based off this that they can do something like that? The brothers, they can get like a big like studio Marvel movie or a big studio action film or something?
Well, see, I don't want them to see
I
them
don't
do a
think-
Marvel movie. Like,
Yeah,
I don't
'cause
want to see that happen.
I don't see that happening either. Not
Yeah.
necessarily based on. Well, then again, money can change anyone's mind, but
Yeah.
based on their mind, as far as where the kind of films are going into right now.
Yeah.
So you don't see that happening?
No, I don't see that happening right now. I think especially them signing on to do that 48 hours remake. I think Jared Carmichael's in it, so I'm guessing he's playing like the Eddie Murphy part. But I think what those guys did so well was the tension, was the energy, and was making a impossibly unlikable character the protagonist. And when you watch the original 48 Hours, like Nick Nolte's character is like a total dick.
Yeah.
So like I could see I would even like to see like Robert Pattinson come in and be
Yeah.
that part. Like that'd be pretty dope. So
Do,
I
do
hope
you
they
feel
do
the
that.
same way about Robert Pattinson's character that I did?
Yeah. I mean,
Because everyone's like, he's just like a misunderstood guy. And I'm like, no,
Yeah.
he's not. He should get shot in the head.
Yeah.
He's awful. He's
Yeah.
like the most manipulative dude in the world. Like,
Yeah.
he's such a douche in this movie.
I feel like he's manipulative, and then he's losing his mind at the same time.
That's true. He is going crazy.
It's like that is like a confluence of just like the most undesirable aspects
That's
of
a very good
humanity.
point.
And so
Yeah, let's move on to my number 5. My number 5 is a guy who made a movie that was pretty big this year. It's again, my directors are mainly, big studio films and all that, but I feel like this guy had such a staple on his film and had he came into the biggest franchise of all time, and yet he made his own film. And he made his own original style. And he comes from the indie circuit, and that's Taika Waititi. Taika Waititi, to me, made one of the most fun, original Marvel movies ever. Like, he legitimately brought his own Kiwi, New Zealand style of comedy into a giant tentpole Marvel film with a character of Thor and with a cast that is mainly Australian and New Zealand, which to me is so cool because he didn't leave his culture at the door when coming into a big blockbuster American type movie. He made it original. He made it feel very New Zealandy, Australian, kind of that whole islander feel,
Yeah.
which is his background, which is literally his background. And all his movies have had that feel, which he made one of my favorite movies of 2015, which is What We Do in the Shadows. He made a ton of other, like Hunt for the Wilder
People.
He made
Dear Boy, I think that's the one of his first ones, something like that.
correct, yeah, and it's one of those guys who he's known for making tiny movies, tiny little indie movies, and he's known for making comedy.
Yeah, Flight of Conchords.
Flight of the Conchords, there you go, which is an amazing show, and I love that show so much. And yet he brought that. He didn't leave that his own style and his own tone at the door. It's not even like a visual thing or a spectacle thing. It's more of a tonal thing. It's more of a comedic thing where all the Marvel films have kind of dove into the comedic style anyways, but his brand and his style of comedy is so unique and so original that it really elevated Thor Ragnarok from being just another funny Marvel movie to being an oddly weird mix of comedy that you don't think might work with this character, and it works perfectly. And not only that, I felt like himself, he's a character himself. And that to me is like so key when you're a director, when you can literally be on a podcast or on an interview show or on like ABC, Good Morning America, and literally sell the movie based on your own character. Because he's a character. Like I don't know if you've seen him in interviews, but the guy's crazy. Like he's just this
It's like
comedic.
Hawaiian shirts.
Yeah, and he's just like this goofy, crazy guy. When you ask him a question, he's like giving you like a sarcastic response, and he's kind of playing around with you because he's a character within himself. And I feel like that's what made him so unique and original, is the fact that the director of this movie himself is selling the movie in a way that he thinks would be sold by doing all this press, right? And it's crazy
Right.
because when you do so much press in movies, you get tired of it and you start saying the same thing over and over again. And you can kind of tell when you see interviews of people, and yet in every single one of his interviews, they're all different. I saw a ton of them. I think you caught me watching them one of the times that
Yeah.
you came in here
Yeah.
because I'm so fascinated by him and fascinated by the way he markets his movies through his own character, similar to like a Ryan Reynolds would
Right.
for Deadpool, where he's kind of playing off in social media with his character. Taika did a similar type thing where he would bring his own personality, his own brand of New Zealand comedy into the Thor movie and made it one of the most successful, one of the biggest movies of the year, and one of the movies that brought in such an original style into the Marvel Cinematic Universe. And for that reason, he's my number 5. As you can tell, the people that are going to be above him are going to be bringing him something pretty good too. But
Right. No, I mean, Taika Waititi's my guy, man. I mean, I didn't really love Thor Ragnarok.
Yeah, I know you
I know.
didn't.
I just, I thought.
I'm telling you, man, watch it again. It's so good. It's so good.
Yeah. I'll give it a review. I mean, look, I enjoy Taika Waititi stuff. I mean, we talked about what we do in Shadow a lot. I haven't actually seen Hunt for the Water People, but I really do want to get around to seeing that. But I mean, his whole like style of humor is very unique and very original, and you can see that definitely come to the forefront and Thor, and I think that's. And I think you're right. That does make a recipe for a successful director, having their impact, their touch, their voice shine bright and throughout each of their movies. Which is why, I mean, I'm kind of going to jump to my number 4 here, but I'm also going to talk about another Marvel director who kind of started the Marvel Cinematic Cosmic Universe.
Okay.
Mr. James Gunn here,
All right.
director of Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2. To me, this was the film that I loved a lot. And the Marvel movie, that I enjoyed the most in 2017. To me, it was one of the better Marvel movies ever. It's probably one of my top 5 because the way it handles the different levels of emotional complexity that they deal with each individual character having their own arc with like the idea of family, and are they able to connect with each other as a family, even to the extent of Chris Pratt's Star-Lord being faced with the question of his father and the existence of his father, and his father kind of representing the idea of male egoism. He's literally called Ego the Living Planet. So, and how his father is just going to it's the idea of having a lost father and finally coming back into your life, and how the loss of like a male influence can affect somebody. And I think it works powerfully on each of those levels. And when we go to like Nebula and her arc with her sister fighting and fighting against Thanos, and and with Rocket not having any idea of where his place is in this whole group. So to me, I love this movie a lot, and I think this is an example of a Marvel movie that I like. Again, I like Thor Ragnarok, but kind of putting those two like back, like next to each other. Almost, they're kind of similar movies in a way.
Sure.
I mean, to me, like I said it before on this podcast, is like Thor is like the city '80s kid, like the punk music, the Led Zeppelin. Whereas like something like Guardians is more like the Midwest, like kind of chillax middle America kind of deal. So I kind of, but for me, I personally lean more towards the aesthetics of Guardians, also because it's very clearly a James Gunn movie.
Sure.
Like if you watch like Scooby-Doo 2, they kind of have the same sight gag, with the whole sight gag where Rocket and Yondu are going through like the different space warps and their faces just like morphing. That's something like straight out of like Scooby-Doo that James Gunn wrote. So again, like that's where I appreciate that movie on that level, and I think it's just so funny. The humor really worked for me. So
Yeah, it's crazy how I like Thor for the exact same reasons you really liked Guardians. Like,
Yeah.
I love Thor because of the reasons you loved Guardians too, which is like, keeping the director keeping his own style of comedy,
Yeah.
the comedic tone of it, like the emotional vibes of it. Because I thought the emotion, the few times we got emotion in Thor, because it is few times, but it's still a comedy, so it doesn't really, it's not super necessary. But I thought they worked amazingly well, and it got me. Like everything that a lot of people said that it didn't get them, as far as like Odin and all that, it got me, dude. I was like, I'm feeling it, man. I felt Odin, like I felt that. So yeah, man, James Gunn is still a director that he is still the biggest Marvel movie this year.
Yeah,
Guardians 2.
yeah,
I mean,
without
as
a
far as
doubt.
box office, right?
Yeah,
It made the most money this year as far as box office. So it beat out Spider-Man, it beat out Thor, and it
yeah,
made
it's
a ton of
biggest
money.
superhero movie of the year
Yeah, and
too.
he had a big year too because you could even argue that the Disney Guardians of the Galaxy ride at
Oh,
Disneyland,
right, right, right.
that's all James Gunn,
Right.
dude.
I mean, even looking at his influence within the universe, right? He started the whole cosmic
It's true.
universe that they're pursuing. I mean, that's pretty much what Phase 4 is going to lead into, and even Thor Ragnarok kind of adapts a little bit of that aesthetic too
Sure.
to keep like the continuity with how this is how like the space movies are going to look versus how the Earth movies are going to look. So
Sure, and it's crazy because Guardians 2 wasn't as well received as his first Guardians, considering that Guardians of the Galaxy is still probably my favorite
right,
Marvel cinematic, like Marvel movie, the
right.
MCU movie. So it's crazy how Guardians 2 wasn't as well received because it was a follow up to that.
Mhm.
But it's still a really good movie. It's still really funny and really good. I think you loved it more than most people did because I know a
Yeah,
lot of people had it like it was good, but not as great as like the first one. Or
yeah.
where would you put it as far as, because I don't know if I've asked you that, as far as like the first one.
I mean,
Would you still put the first
I
one slightly higher?
you know what? I kind of rewatched part two the other day, man. I'm not gonna lie. I think I kind of dig that one a little more than the first one,
Yeah, that's
honestly.
crazy.
Yeah, just because I mean I love the first one, but the first one was about the loss of a mother. This one's about discovering a father and
Sure,
losing a father too. So
sure.
it's like whoa, that's like it
More
was like
emotional.
double emotion, and plus also the Hitchcock references, guys. I love it. I love it. There's like four Hitchcock references in that movie. So every time I see those, I'm like, this is grade A storytelling right here.
That's crazy, man,
Uh,
because both of our directors are, MCU guys, which is kind of funny
yeah,
considering, the hate that they've been getting a little bit this
right,
year.
right, right. I mean, that's the same thing with that's kind of nerd culture what it's kind of led to in the sense that if a movie isn't so like perfect, like a lot of people are going to be disappointed, just like screaming their heads off at somebody. But I'm glad to see that at least with a little with Marvel movies has been less to an extent of a problem as of recently. Is more like the Star Wars stuff that's been dominating the conversation, of course. But I mean, I'm hoping that we could all come to a progressive union as fans and as nerds
Sure.
because we just all love the same stuff.
I agree,
Yeah.
100%. All right, my number four is from an indie type director, an indie type movie this year that blew up this year. Considering award season and Oscar season and all that,
Right.
and it's gonna blow up even more later in the beginning of this year when it comes to like sweeping the awards. I
Mm.
almost guarantee it's gonna sweep a lot of awards, and that's Greta Gerwig. Greta Gerwig made an entirely fun original movie in Lady Bird. She made a very personal story that I still think it's so fascinating that she made such a personal story that connected with so many people.
Hmm.
Like the fact that it's almost literally about her growing up in Sacramento and being like an outsider in Sacramento, and yet I related to a 17-year-old teenage girl, and I did
Yeah.
not think I would relate to this because watching the movie initially, I was like, "This is gonna be cute," but it's not gonna be my type of movie, considering it's about, like a coming of age with the 17-year-old girl and his mom, and I'm like, "Oh, I'm sure it's fine, but I don't think I'm gonna like it." I
Right.
walked
Right.
out and we saw it together,
Yeah.
and I was like, "Damn." I related to some of that stuff, and I
Right.
never thought I would have related to some of it, considering it's so personal to her, right? It's such a
Right.
personal story to her, and it's one of the most tightly directed movies I've seen this year, if not the most tightly directed movies I've seen this year. It's incredibly well directed, and I don't think enough credit is being given to her when it comes to that.
Hmm.
But considering that she literally wrote and directed the movie, so it's all her mind, all her vision. It all comes from her, where it's the pre-production, the production, and the post-production. So I feel like the performances we get from Laurie Metcalf, the performance we get from Saoirse Ronan, is from the brain and from the effort of Greta Gerwig. And for that reason, I feel like she made one of the greatest debut films I've seen in years. She established such a great original type of movie that so many people can relate to and has been getting such good buzz and good word of mouth, not just in the indie circuit, but also in the mainstream circuit as well, where it's kind of blowing up to reach out to different audiences and telling people, hey, you should go see this movie, Lady Bird, Lady Bird, Lady Bird. It's on the tip of everyone's tongue because it's such a good, well rounded, tightly wound movie. And I think Greta just blew up this year when it comes to making that type of movie. And I know she's in the Hollywood Reporter Roundtable now,
Oh,
and it's
really?
crazy because yeah, it hasn't officially come out yet, but I've seen like a clip of it, and she's surrounded by like Guillermo del Toro and like Denis Villeneuve and like big time like super powerful veteran directors, and she's kind of there like the newbie, and it's crazy seeing how now she's like rubbing shoulders with like goats,
Hmm.
which is kind of crazy. And I think she's clearly my number four for that reason, and I think she deserves a lot, and I mean a lot of credit for what she did this year. I even think she should be nominated for top five directors of this year as far as like the Oscars. I think she should be nominated. I'm that confident that her directing was that good this year.
Right, right, right. Well, guess what, Ace? She's also on my list. So,
Hey,
hey, listen, 2017 has been the year of screenwriters coming to prominence, making their directorial debuts. We've
yep.
seen it with writers like relative newcomers like Taylor Sheridan with Wind River, Aaron Sorkin, more seasoned veteran going into director's chair of Molly's Game. But with Greta Gerwig coming off of her sting as a writer and as an actress, frequently collaborating with her husband Noah Baumbach and doing the 2012 film Frances Ha, which I first caught attention to what she was capable of doing as an actress and as a writer. So in watching that film and seeing how Baumbach was able to direct that movie, make her so charming, but still like relatable and relevant. So when I going into Lady Bird, you kind of wonder how much of that Frances Ha genius was her versus was her husband, and this is her first solo debut. So how's it going to go? But like you said, it's probably one of the most personal movies that we're going to see this year, whether that be because of the emotional stakes that we have. I mean, it's such a personal movie because it's literally her childhood. She grew up in 2002 in Sacramento, so the whole setting is just that time period. It feels real, feels lived in. But directing aside, as a writer, being able to convey that much thought and that much deep, kind of crafting every character around the main character of Lady Bird, kind of correct, making every character around her three-dimensional. We even see like the Lucas Hedges character has his own arc. Her friend, I can't remember who plays her friend in that movie. Saoirse Rona's like friend.
Yeah,
She was in a few other things too.
she's got a interesting name. I forget her.
Yeah, yeah, but she has she
She's
has
great.
a she has a full dimensional arc. And like you said, the who plays her mother, I can't, again, this is another name I can't remember off top,
Is it
but
Laura Metcalf?
Laura McCoff, yeah, yeah, yeah. And she has a full arc and the father has a full. So it's like as a writer you're able to put those things into perspective, meanwhile being able to direct a competent, like well executed coming of age story that to me is pretty timeless. I mean, the time period obviously connects and correlates with some of the ideas that are being come across, like not really politically, but like the mind state of America in that time period after like 9/11 and stuff. They address that to a certain extent, but it's more about how teenage years are so ingrained in all of us, and those memories, and how memories mean so much to people, and how when we move away from home, how those memories come back to us, and we're feeling nostalgic, we're feeling homesick, and all of that stuff is just so powerful. It's one of my favorite movies of the year that she just made right here, and it to me is. I don't say this a lot, but it's kind of a perfect movie in my at least in my interpretation of it. So I don't know, I loved it, and I'm glad to see that Greta Gerwig was able to step out. I mean, there's been obviously a lot of really powerful female directors that have been hitting the scenes this year.
Yeah.
Patty Jenkins. I'm going to talk about another one a little later on this list, but there's the more female directors that we're having being themselves, expressing their voices, and making a splash throughout the cinematic, throughout Hollywood and everything. So I just love that this is the time period that this is happening. So this is Greta
It's
Gerwig,
crazy. Also, like the fact that she is so, I mean, she's not super young, but the fact that she is quite young for a director, considering too, because everyone, she's a female director, but she's also a young female director. She's got that youth perspective, and the fact that we see how a young person can, take charge and take hold and give a very original, true to self, personal story through her own perspective and through her own eyes. Because I do feel like sometimes we fall into the trap of you know, romancing the past and romancing certain things of the way things were in certain eras and certain types of movies that even we got in 2017, whether it's the 60s, the 70s, the 80s, whatever that may be. But now seeing a movie about 2002 is such a powerful thing because it's like, oh, that was like not that long ago. It's not
Yeah.
like the 80s or like the 70s. It's like, no, this is like my childhood in the 2000s. And you're like, what? That's
Yeah.
not going to hit a lot of audiences, but it does because people forget like the youth and the charm that she brings and the relevance that she brings to that time period is so good. And the fact that it's a period piece in the 2000s, that's
Right.
cool. Like that's just cool in itself. And I really can't talk enough about her directing because I do feel like it's one of the best we got this year. Like directing.
Yeah.
Like a lot of people, talk the writing, the score, but the literal directing that she did in this movie is top notch. Was that your number three, by the way? I wasn't sure.
Yeah, yeah. Honestly, man, I think I might have abandoned the numbers. I realized I put some people over.
Oh, gotcha.
But it is what it is. But yeah, number three. Yeah,
All
for
right,
me. Yeah.
just so I could jump back to
Yeah,
mine.
yeah.
My number three director of 2017. It's just so we can get on with it. Is a director that legitimately blew up this year as well, and made what I feel is one of the most iconic movies of this year, considering that it was on the tip of everyone's tongue. It made so many memes, it made so many GIFs, it made so many moments, and it hit so many different types of audiences, which to me is the most relevant thing you can do. Where we literally right before we started recording, we were talking about how certain movies seem to market certain to different demographics now, and it's so hardcore to the point that I feel like it's unnecessary. Where if I'm gonna make a movie for black people, for white people, for this and that and that, and it feels like studios are really trying to push that as far as excluding everyone else and including certain types of people and demographics. Where I feel like this movie broke all that and it hit black people, white people, Mexicans, like a ton of Mexicans. I know because I am one of the Mexicans.
Right.
But it's crazy how many demographics this movie hit. And that is Andy Muschietti with It,
Oh, It,
the director
okay.
of It. This guy is from Argentina. He has an Italian ass last name, and he's a Latino director from South America. Freaking shadow of Guillermo del Toro, like his apprentice. And he made, like I said before, one of the most iconic movies of 2017. And this movie hit people hard, and it hit a broader type of audience than usual horror movies do. It's literally the biggest horror movie ever made, and it's one of those horror movies that so many horror people complain. And trust me, I heard him because I work with him. That oh, this wasn't even that scary. It wasn't that horror. It's not the point. The point was to hit a bigger market. The point was to bring that type of fear to everyone, to 13-year-olds, to 30-year-olds, to 40-year-olds, till my dad who went out and saw this movie. Like that's the whole point of this movie, is to reach such a bigger demographic by not making it so inclusionary to horror fans, by saying this is a horror movie, we're gonna have the horror, we're gonna have this crazy things. And no, it's just a movie about kids growing up, coming of age, going through a very traumatic time in their life period by facing off with this creature from hell, whatever Pennywise is. And it's such a relatable front on that end, because it is children in the movie, and it did hit so many types of audiences and so many types of ages and demographics, because it's so captivating and so creepy. And what Skarsgård did in this movie was so freaking good and so fun and so scary and creepy and demonic, and it just hit so many fronts that it impacted such a large amount of people that I was shocked. I was like, man, this movie didn't just hit like movie fans, horror fans, film critics, or just basic moviegoers. This movie was like an event. Like people were like, we're gonna go out to see it, and I'm taking my brother, and I'm taking my sister, or I'm taking my girlfriend, or I'm taking whoever, because I want to experience this movie with a large audience and with a big amount of people. And for that reason, it was one of the rare times we saw critic success as far as like a high rating on critics fronts, and box office success as far as making a ton of money. And all that is from Andy Muschietti, and I don't think he's getting enough credit because I feel like every moment in this film is from his brain, and everything is from him pushing it. Whether it be the budget of this movie, which is actually kind of a high budget considering for a horror movie, right? Considering we had other horror movies this year that were like 5 million, $10 million. This movie was like, I think it was like 50 to 60 mil, which is kind of a lot for a
Yeah,
horror
medium
movie.
budget.
That's kind of a big budget for a horror movie. And it was all like from him. When you give that much money to a horror director, which is rare, think about it, man. You don't give that much money to a horror director. Like,
Nah.
the horror directors don't get that much money to
Well,
make these movies.
yeah.
And he got that much money because they trusted him to make a very powerful, good follow up to a Stephen King adaptation that everyone was so precious of, and yet everyone kind of was like, man, that was really good. So I give so much credit to Andy, and I don't think he's getting enough credit considering how much he had at stake. Where if you mess it up, the Stephen King fans are going to hate you, or the It fans from the 90s series are going to hate you, or the new kids are not going to appreciate it. Like he really had a lot to lose with this movie.
There's a lot of pressure. Yeah,
It was so much pressure.
Yeah.
And I think he delivered on every single front and hitting so many demographics that I think it's such a timeless movie that everyone can appreciate. And not just horror fans who were like, oh, well, it didn't scare me, man. I want it to be scary. And I'm like, dude, it's supposed to be very inclusionary of different types of people and ages and stuff. So I felt like it didn't have to be over the top, gory, or extra scary. Like the few scares that it had was good enough for me.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I don't think there's too many fans of the '90s horror movie. Like let's not. If
You're surprisingly a lot.
Listen,
there's
nah,
I'm
on.
telling you, man, there's a lot.
if you're a fan of the '90s It show,
Yeah.
come on, man.
I'm telling you, man, I work
you
with
have
it.
no, you have if you have no reason to complain about this new one because the new one's great. I mean, this new
Yeah.
2017 version,
Yeah.
it's a faithful adaptation of the Stephen. It's faithful to an extent. I mean, I read the book recently. I didn't like necessarily read the whole thing because it's like 1,000 pages. But
Yeah, it's
like,
huge.
but I was particularly interested in writing a paper on it for a class talking about like the racial politics that goes on in this movie. I think that's something that also doesn't go mentioned a lot about this movie is how they kind of underhandedly address how the racial implications of like the Stephen King's original work is kind of put into this. How the black kid, I believe his name is Lucas in this movie.
I don't think so.
I don't know,
Lucas
I
is
don't
the
know.
kid from Stranger Things.
Okay.
Unless he has the same name, he could.
I don't know. Oh, probably. See, that's the thing, though. I mean, Stranger Things takes so much from
That's so true.
from the original source material,
Gotcha.
and we become so familiar with Stranger Things, obviously, in this time period. But Mike's his name, and
Mike,
yeah.
gotcha.
So the way Mike was kind of getting picked on, like I appreciate it on a lot of levels because it addresses that to some extent.
It does, yeah.
And I think obviously having a person of color behind the camera could put that a little bit into the forefront. Now, do I necessarily like how they handle Mike's character? Not necessarily, but that's one of the few flaws. I mean, this movie doesn't have a lot of problems. Like it doesn't have a lot of flaws. It's a pretty universally, accessible film. A lot of the moments are, even if they're not necessarily scary, they're still spectacular. That moment where the It Clown Pennywise jumps out of the projector and he literally takes over like the garage. I'm like, yo, that's
freaky.
nuts. Yeah,
It's creepy.
yeah. I think having a visual director like Andy Machete behind the camera, who has a real sense. I mean, if you haven't watched Mama that he did, Guillermo del Toro produced that one. If you haven't watched Mama, that is a true horror. Like somebody who's a fan of traditional old style horror, having their reign behind the camera. So I loved it. I think that hopefully it comes. A lot of people. It has that argument now. People saying it's overrated, overplayed because it's the highest grossing horror movie of all time. But I think of it less as necessarily a horror movie, but also as a coming of age story. And I think that's where the movie does really well too, because a lot of times when you mix up genres like horror and comedy, sometimes it works really well, sometimes it falls flat on its face. But here they mixed horror with coming of age, and you do get the coming of age aspect just as strongly and as powerfully as you get the horror stuff, and how the coming of age influences the horror, and how incorporating when the chick, the redhead girl,
Beverly.
Beverly. There we go. Sorry to call her the chick. She's not the chick, but it's not sorry.
She's the
But
Beverly.
yeah. Sorry, feminists. My apologies, but my bad. Now when she's having that whole thing of
Yeah.
having her problems, maturing as a woman, and that is incorporated into the horror that she faces, that's really powerful stuff. And
Super powerful stuff.
yeah, and
And the fact that it comes from like the fear of like literally rape from your dad, that's creepy ass scary shit. That's some scary shit.
I mean, that's more that's more frightening and scary than like the actual like Pennywise and what's going on.
And which
in
is
this
kind of the
movie.
point of the movie, which is why I get frustrated when people talk about like, well, it wasn't like you don't get it. Like what Beverly is facing is way more horrifying than when you visually see in the movie.
Yeah.
Like it's a truly horrifying thing, and you're kind of ignoring it because you don't have that perspective.
Right.
I don't know. I just feel like this movie is so great on so many fronts.
And the main character losing his little brother, thinking that's
Yeah.
his fault. That's real life fear.
That's some dark stuff,
That's
dude. Yeah.
that's deep. And then even the bully character, I can't remember because again I'm going to just
forget
keep
his
mixing
name,
up
too.
names from Stranger
Billy?
Things. I think
Which is the name of the bully in Stranger Things?
I shit you not, Ace. I was literally going to say Billy. I'm like,
Yeah,
I
I
don't
think
think
that's the name of the bully in Stranger Things.
Yeah,
The Power Rangers guy.
yeah. So I was like, I don't want to say that. So, but yeah, that. But you see,
Yeah,
that's-
as far as like the fear of his dad and
yeah,
stuff.
fear of
and-
his dad, and he obviously has that big moment, but that's crazy. That's just as scary, if not scarier to me too. So, and it only amps up the stakes to the next level. Now, my question to you though, brother, like, I don't know if you read the original Cary Fukunaga script that this
No.
was based off of.
I've heard of it, but I
Yeah.
didn't. I've heard of some things that were going to happen in it, so you can reference it. I might get it.
Yeah. I mean, what the script is basically like 90% of the same movie, except that some of the key scares are kind of changed around, right? Where the kid who's like the little Jewish kid, his fear is of the painting coming to life, if I'm not mistaken, in the movie. In the original Cary Fukunaga script, it was very much like The Shining, where it's like an old lady comes out of a bathtub and like chases him around. Like those are the kind of little changes that are the difference here. Now, do you think if this movie was under the reign of someone like a Cary Fukunaga, do you think it would have done as well or impacted as many audiences?
No, I really do feel I'm 100% behind Andy being the reason why this film was so successful. Maybe if Cary did it, he would have hit more horror fans and more fans that were like, "Oh, I wanted to be freaked out and be disturbed." He might have hit those fans, but he wouldn't have hit such a large audience. Considering what Andy did was make it the right amount of creep, freak, gore, and just scare, and not excessive to the point that it just becomes a gore fest or a traditional horror movie. This is very much a coming of age story about kids facing off with things that they personally have a fear of, and reaching such a large demographic from teenagers to, like I said, adults and older adults. That I feel like the way Andy handled it just hit so many of the right angles and so many of the right notes that I just think it was flawless. It was just so well done in that sense of as far as hitting so many different types of demographics that I don't feel like Cary could have done that.
Right.
Cary could have done a scarier version, maybe a creepier version, sure, but not a fuller, rounder movie.
Yeah, I mean that's the main reason why he ended up leaving the project, because he wanted to make more of an art house kind of feel. It would have been more in the vein, kind of, we talked about the Shining homages that he originally had in the script. It would have been more in that tone and more in that style. But with Cary, I'm sorry, not Cary Fukunaga, with Cary Fukunaga departing, allowing Andy Machete to come in and making it like this big like cultural zeitgeist. Would it make $700 million at the box office worldwide?
I think it made
That's
more.
crazy. Isn't it the highest grossing R-rated?
It's the highest grossing R-rated movie of all time.
Yeah.
R-rated horror movie, just anything in general.
Yeah, so that's next level.
It's next level, and the fact that something I brought up too, and I want to hear your thoughts on it. But the fact that it did hit so many types of demographics, man. Like I can't tell you how many Latino people saw this movie.
Yeah,
and I'm assuming a ton of Black people saw the movie too.
Yeah,
a ton of white people saw the movie, like, and a ton of like young people, like too young to be in an R-rated movie.
Yeah,
and like older people, like people who were like, in their 40s and their 50s, and
people were familiar with the original.
People familiar with the original book, right? It comes. I haven't seen a movie, an R-rated movie, to hit that many types of demographics, whether it comes to race, whether it comes to age, in a while or ever, to be honest, for an R-rated movie. Like that many types of demographics for age and race. It's just not enough credit is being given to Andy Muschietti to be given so much pressure to do this iconic, creepy, scary clown movie, right? Because that's what it is for people who don't know the source material. And he had all that pressure and just deliver on every single front.
Right.
To me, it's just not enough people are talking about that.
Yeah, I mean he's pretty next level, man, and I'm glad to see him getting some recognition. And Guillermo del Toro's obviously had a landmark year as well. I don't know if you're going to be talking about him on your list.
Is that your number two? Is that your next person?
I was, he was close to making it, but I'm actually going to go in a little bit of a different direction here, Ace, because I personally have been championing the streaming platform nonstop since we started this podcast. You know this.
Oh, I know who you're going with.
So I'm gonna champion what streaming has done for young independent filmmakers breaking out into the industry, making big budget pictures, doing things that they probably wouldn't have had access to, resources they probably wouldn't have had access to, and a climate like this. And I think especially, and we're talking about a new age of cinema where we're incorporating more diversity, more voices, more backgrounds, and we've had some pretty standout, people of color directing movies. We talked about Taika Waititi earlier, Guillermo del Toro, obviously, with The Shape of Water, Andy Muschietti. But for me, when it comes to black cinema, Jordan Peele has done something remarkable with Get Out and how that film is hit. But not enough people are talking about Dee Reeves, the woman who directed the new Netflix movie Mudbound.
So you saw Mudbound?
Yeah.
Finally.
I finally got around.
Yeah, I was gonna say I've been talking about Mudbound.
You've
for
been
months.
asking me if I have seen Mudbound since the day it came out. Yeah, I'm gonna get around to watching it.
Yeah.
I watched that movie recently, man. It was such a powerful experience. Taking a story that's set in the Great Depression era of America and how the Southern family gets tied in with these complicated racial politics that are happening in the South, and how each personality has to deal with that individually. But I'm so glad to see Dee Reeves have the opportunity and see Netflix have the opportunity to put a story like this on screen. You know what I mean? To where now people are having conversations. I mean, maybe it's not the most buzzed about movie of 2017 by no stretch of the imagination. In fact, it's probably not even the most buzzed about Netflix thing. I mean, we've had a lot of people talking about stuff like Bride or Stranger Things or Okja. But to me, Mudbound deserves to be in the conversation just as much as anything else. And, with Dee Reeves being a director who back in 2013 made her feature debut with Pariah, a movie about, a black lesbian teenager. Well, many would kind of say it was like Moonlight before Moonlight came out, and that was her first splash. It was endorsed by Oprah, Tyler Perry, all of these big figures. And then she goes on to direct the TV movie with Bessie, with Queen Latifah, getting Queen Latifah an Emmy Award for Best Actress and being nominated for Best Writing and Best Directing, and I believe the 2016 Emmys. So, and then going on to do Mudbound, making one of the best movies of the year, while also telling a prominent and unique story, and making sure that none of her directorial styles or aspects get put into the background. And I think that's what's most important, what's powerful about this director. And I think now that there's a new wave of African American females behind the chair, where we're talking about Ava DuVernay, or I always forget the woman's name, but she directed Love and Basketball, and she's doing the Black Cat movie for Sony.
Gina Prince Bythewood?
Yeah, Gina Prince Bythewood. Yeah, there we go. And again, another woman of color, another black woman being able to tell her stories and going into the big budget mainstream world. And even though Mudbound's not a big budget movie,
it's surprisingly a bigger budget than you might think.
Right.
You can see it. At least me being a budget guy, I can kind of see it on screen where it's like this thing actually had like a budget. It's not like they gave her like $2 million to make it or something.
Right.
Like it actually had a pretty decent size.
Yeah. So I'm all for it, and I love the fact that, again, this is more championing towards more directors of color and also more streaming platforms doing their thing. Because without Netflix, we wouldn't have had a movie like this. So I appreciate it on that front. But what are your thoughts on?
Yeah, I mean, dude, it's something that I don't know if you know this, but it's nominated for outstanding cast for the SAG Awards.
For the SAG Awards, yeah.
Which is a big deal. Like my buddy mentioned this the other day. He said like the last I forget what he said. He gave me a statistic, but he said the last time every year SAG nominates their outstanding cast in a movie, they always get nominated for the Oscar.
Oh, really?
Yeah, he said something like that where he told me like every time a cast, because the other nominees are like Lady Bird and Get Out and stuff like that, stuff that we know is going to be nominated for Best Picture.
Yeah.
But he told me, he's like, seeing Mudbound in there makes me feel like, wow, that's a big deal because the last few times we've had an outstanding cast nomination for the SAG Awards, they've gotten an Oscar Best Picture nom.
All right.
Which that's a huge deal. Even if they don't get it, which they probably might not get it, Mudbound, I'm saying.
All right.
But that's a big deal, man. Getting the outstanding cast, and it 100% deserves. That cast is phenomenal. Yeah. What's her name? Blew my mind. I told you about it, but Mary J. Blige.
Mary J. Blige.
Holy crap! I was like, I didn't know until after I saw the movie. I swear. And it's funny because they've been using her to sell the movie.
Right.
And I didn't know about it until afterwards, where they were like, that was Mary J. Blige, and I'm like, it was? Yeah. Like, I was blown away, because obviously I know Jason Mitchell from Straight Outta Compton.
And Jason Clark.
And what's the other guy's name? Garrett Huntley? Garrett something?
Yeah, I think that's his
name.
Yeah,
he's good. He's great in the movie, too.
Yeah.
But I didn't know Mary J. Blige. I didn't know that was Mary J. Blige, which to me is shocking. Yeah. And the guy who plays the father as well is a great actor.
Jonathan Banks. Yeah.
So it's a really, really, really great cast, and I'm so glad it's getting that attention. It was also, I think it won Best Cast for the Indie Spirit Awards too.
Yeah. I mean, I think it did. Yeah, and it's getting a lot of movement. I think Netflix is pushing it pretty hard for some looks. I mean, I don't know. It's a crowded year in the Oscars.
It is.
I don't know if it'll necessarily end up making the 10. I don't know, because even then the Producers Guild even nominated like 11 nominees, right? Like, that's how packed this year is. Like,
it's a pretty stacked year.
PGA nominates 11 nominees instead of 10. So I don't know if they're actually going to use the full 10 this year in the Oscars, but even if it is in the 10, it'll be tough to squeeze out something else. But I do hope to see it do successful. And again, having the backing from Netflix, and being able to have as many people being able to watch it as possible, something I'm always going to celebrate and champion. So
it's great, and it's great that, like you said before, we get what Netflix is able to do is able to give an opportunity to people that might not get the opportunity, especially when it comes to budget. Because I feel like that's so important, and that's something that not enough people talk about. And me being like a box office nerd, because I'm a box office nerd, a lot of people don't talk about what goes on behind the scenes as far as directors saying, hey, I have a vision, will you support my vision? And most studios are like, we will support your vision. And you're like, great, thanks, for $2 million. And you're like, come on, really? You can't give me more than that? Nope, sorry, go somewhere else. And they go somewhere else, and someone like Netflix is like, we have a ton of money, we'll give you 20 mil. And it's like, really? Because the other studio just offered me too. Like, that's an actual thing that happens where like directors come and pitch their movies, and studios are like, that sounds cool, we'll give you like $1 million. And it's like, that's not, I'm not able to make my movie for $1 million. And Netflix can be like, hey, we have so much cash, we're just going to give you all the money. And that's one thing, like, say what you will of Bright. That's one thing that David Ayer talked about at the Comic-Con panel, which you were at. You and I were at that panel, and he basically said that. He basically said, like, I was just like, I want to make my movie, and Netflix is like, all right, how much you need? And he's like, damn, how much I need? That's great.
He said he felt like he was working on an indie project, like he was like in his old days. And I love the fact that, and even something like Okja too. I mean, we're not doing our top 10 list yet, but you know,
Bujong Ho, what's his name? Bujong Ho.
Yeah, I don't want to like.
I think it's Bujong Ho.
Yeah, but he did Snowpiercer. He did a lot of great Korean films. And I just think he's one of the best directors working.
And they were able to give him a budget.
Right. I mean, Okja's a big budget.
That's a big budget.
Yeah. That's like an international. Like,
that's a nice budget.
Yeah. And that's one of my top. I don't want to say where it's out on my list, but it's up there.
It's crazy because it is a good point, because I do feel like Netflix gave us a lot of good. Okja's one. Mudbound's another. I actually liked War Machine. I know you didn't. But I thought War Machine was like such an interesting perspective. And I think a lot of people didn't appreciate that. You also didn't like the caricature of Brad Pitt. I liked the caricature of Brad Pitt. But there was another one too. I think it was, I talked about it on Schmoes, The Incredible Jessica James from The Daily Show, the girl from The Daily Show. I think she's so freaking dope. And I think that her movie that no one saw on Netflix was a really good movie as well.
To the Bone was also another good
To the
one.
Bone. Shout out to
Yeah.
Keanu Reeves.
Keanu Reeves, yeah,
Keanu Reeves is my
yeah.
boy, dude. I love Keanu Reeves.
Right,
So
right.
it really is. I've always, you know, my stance on Netflix as far as
Yeah.
I have issues with them
Yeah.
being like, here, go make what you want, and we're not going to talk about it.
Yeah.
Where it's like, that's frustrating to me because it's like, what's the point of giving all this money to all these creative directors if you're not going to push them till the death? Because that's what I would do if I were a studio. Kind of like, you know, say what you will of Paramount, they pushed the crap out of Mother and the crap out of Darren Aronofsky.
Yeah, but they do have every
They do.
like every Oscar movie. Like they got Silence didn't get any conversation,
But they push.
They pushed it really hard.
Whereas like Netflix, I feel like they're like, we don't have to push. It's Netflix.
Yeah.
Where I get frustrated with that, but that's a great choice as well.
Yeah.
I'm gonna jump into my number two, and my number two is what a lot of people might have as their number one. My number two is Patty Jenkins. Patty Jenkins to me, everything that she did for Wonder Woman is something that she deserves so much credit. She deserves so much credit, and there's been a lot of conversations as far as like on Collider, on Schmoes and stuff like that, as far as what Wonder Woman has meant. But what Wonder Woman means is pretty powerful when it comes to box office. And for me, like I just said, I'm a box office nerd. It's spectacular. I remember so clearly going into this movie where the projections were. It literally went from 40 to 60 to like, man, 60 would be pretty good, to like 80, and then like 80 would be spectacular, to like it made like over 100 mil opening weekend. And it makes, I think, 800 mil worldwide already.
Worldwide, yeah.
And
over 420 million just domestic.
And to me, that is like, that is so incredible. And it's so crazy how me being a DC fan and growing up with Superman and Batman and Wonder Woman, like that's the Holy Trinity, man. Like that's something, like my brother and I were so hype on Wonder Woman because we were like, finally we get to see like one of the Holy Trinity original Justice League members be on the big screen and have her own movie. And my brother was a fan of Wonder Woman beforehand too with the comics. So we with the new comics, with what DC was, you know, printing out recently with Ares and with Zeus and with the reformed kind of Greek-like Wonder Woman kind of that we've had, because in the past she wasn't as, you know, godlike, but we've had this kind of reform as far as her as Zeus and Ares and all this stuff with gods of war and stuff like that. And we love that stuff, like my brother and I. So finally getting this movie on a comic book level front is awesome. And obviously not enough has been said, but a lot has been said, and with good reason. The fact that so much trepidation comes with putting a female heroine, a female superhero, a female character at the forefront with a big budget. Because you've seen movies that have female superheroes and all that stuff, but you don't see it with this kind of budget, and you don't see it with this kind of success. And I feel like that is one of the most important things. But what separates all that is Patty Jenkins, because it's a female behind the camera. Because we have the Hunger Game movies, which I think the Hunger Game movies are amazing, and I love them so much. But we've had, you know, Gary Ross, Francis Lawrence.
Yeah.
We have male directors behind it. Whereas now we can rightfully say that a female director, Patty Jenkins, has made one of the most successful female movies of all time. And that to me is just so powerful in this year of 2017, that it just hit so many fronts and it delivered on so many levels that I'm kind of disappointed, because it's not the best movie of the year. It's not the best superhero movie of the year, in my opinion, obviously.
Yeah.
And I feel disappointed that a lot of people have been giving it crap now, because I just feel like it's gotten too muddied as far as people giving it all this praise as far as a great movie, and people attacking it because of all the praise and because of the fact that it's a woman behind the camera and it's Wonder Woman, that I feel kind of disappointed, because I feel like it's two fronts going at it, where it's like it should be celebrated that, one, DC made a good movie. Because trust me,
Huh? Their only good movie.
You say that. I love Man of Steel, but that's just me.
Yeah, Man of Steel's cool.
Man of Steel's better than Wonder Woman. But
I agree with that.
Man of Steel's better. but for me, it's like DC made a good movie, which is rare.
Yeah.
That should be celebrated in general. Yeah. DC made a well accepted, critically acclaimed movie as far as like critics liked it, and it made a ton of money, and it's a woman behind the camera. Like that should be celebrated no matter what. It doesn't have to be. People have to say it's the greatest movie of all time. It's the greatest superhero movie of the year. No, but it is a fantastic movie with a female behind the camera who delivered that perspective and that specific female perspective that they wanted to get with this movie, and that's all on Patty Jenkins.
Yeah, I mean, if you're complaining about Wonder Woman because it's a woman character, it's a woman superhero, it's a woman director, you're a fucking loser. All right, you're a loser. That's really what it comes down to. Like, I don't know, man. Like, to me, that's ridiculous. Now, if you don't like Wonder Woman because you think it's overrated as fuck, that's me too. All right, I think it's super overrated. I think it's fine, but it's cool. But the cultural impact cannot be understated here. The fact that you put the most iconic female superhero on screen and gave her a debut with such power. I mean, having a female behind the camera, a woman behind the camera, really emphasizes the femininity of the character, her desire for love, and her pursuit for righteousness and justice. While also showing the ugly side of man and humanity, how we just start wars for like no reason. I mean, that's kind of what Ares was getting at. The villain of the movie the whole time is just like, no, I'm not starting. I might be the god of war, but I'm not making them fight. They're just doing it on their own. You know what I mean? Do they deserve to be served, or do they deserve to be saved? Yeah. Do they deserve to have justice held on their behalf by such a powerful character like Wonder Woman? Probably not. But she makes that choice, and it's it really is the Superman movie that we've been looking for since the original Superman. You know what I mean? This is probably the closest you're going to get to Christopher Reeves in this era is Gal Gadot. And Gal Gadot plays this part to a T, and
it's crazy, yeah, because she's been getting a lot of negative attention, but I thought she's kind of what held the movie together, and that's what I said on the Collider video that's obviously up and that a lot of people have talked about and seen.
Right.
But I said that. I said like it's not a perfect movie. It shouldn't be that high. I still think it shouldn't be that high. I still think it's a good movie, not a great movie. But I do feel like you just said, Gal Gadot is the one that holds it together. It's not about being the most dynamic actress, because she's not. It's about embodying the character, and she does. She embodies Wonder Woman 1,000%.
Right.
She embodies that.
And having Patty Jenkins behind the camera, who has directed she directed Monsters Ball, so she directed not Monsters Ball. Was it Monster? Yeah, just Monster. Monster Ball was the one with Halle Berry, but Monster was the one with Charlize Theron. She won an Academy Award for that.
Yep.
So she clearly has a way of directing these performances and making these movies to where it feels tactile and real, and even all the way towards that battle scene where No Man's Land, where she's like cutting across the field and going into that town and saving all these. Like, that's pretty dope. And you never would have thought. I mean, at least like 10 years ago, 20 years ago, you never would have thought Wonder Woman would have that big of a presence on screen as she does now. But thankfully, because of the uprise in comics and comic books coming into the forefront, we've had the opportunity. And that's also without mentioning that 50% of comic book readers, or I think it's like 46% of comic book readers, are women. So all this time, we've been making these male superhero movies, Batman, Superman, Suicide Squad, but even that one, had Harley Quinn in there, but still like very male-oriented, male-specific movies in the DC universe and in the Marvel universe, frankly. We haven't had a female standalone movie from Marvel yet, so we're finally glad to see a leading, I mean, of course, if you talk about like the older ones like Elektra and like Supergirl, all that stuff. Catwoman,
which is the worst movie
ever. We don't talk, I mean, and they're bad. They make bad movies because they keep making bad choices, not understanding these characters. But now that we have filmmakers that do understand these characters, and we have a director like Patty Jenkins who seemingly makes pretty serious movies, but the fact that she has a grasp on who Wonder Woman is and what she stands for ideologically is nothing but helpful.
It absolutely is, and I really do feel like having that perspective behind the camera is initially and at the end of the day what garnered so much success of the movie as far as making it a good movie.
Right.
Because so many times we can talk about, when it comes to box office, some people have, considering, film fans and movie fans and indie movie fans, like I am, have the bad tendency of saying, well, box office success, if it makes a lot of money, it means that it's reaching to a bigger audience, which means it's dumbing down the material. It's not necessarily true. You can still have a successfully box office good movie where it makes a ton of money and critics can acknowledge the quality of the film.
Right.
And I feel like that's what we got with Patty Jenkins behind the camera, where it's like we maybe could have gotten, like a decent Wonder Woman movie that made a decent amount of money. But the fact that Patty Jenkins put her effort into making a good movie first, then making
an overarching
DC superhero movie that can reach a bigger audience.
Yeah.
I feel like that it should be given so much credit, which is why I'm basing my filmmakers off that, off the not just the critical success, but artistic vision and the success as far as box office, where it's reaching a big audience while still being a thought-provoking, well-directed, well-written, good movie. At the end of the day, that's what we need, and we need the death of crappy movies that get so much money, aka Transformers. But I feel like that's what we've gotten with Patty Jenkins behind the camera, and we've talked about it at length with people at the Schmoes. I don't know if you were there when we talked about it with Emma and Mark. But Em and Mark and I talked about it for a while, and we talked about the importance of having Patty Jenkins behind the camera, which it is incredibly important.
Right.
And I feel that's why I put her at my number 2 of 2017, because no matter what you say, it did have an impact on this year.
Yeah, without a doubt. Speaking of, DC movies, my number 1 pick is somewhat of a veteran of the DC universe, coming off the heels of his acclaimed Batman trilogy that had people foaming at the mouth throughout the mid to late 2000s, early 2010s. Of course, we're talking about the one and only Mr. Christopher Nolan. That's going to be my number 1 director of 2017.
All right.
You know what I mean? Because he is, he after leaving the DC universe, some would argue that his most recent string of films have not been the most successful. Even you're talking about DC, a lot of people regard The Dark Knight Rises as one of his worst movies. And then he follows up with Interstellar, which I disagree with. You disagree, I know.
I heavily disagree with.
I think Batman Rises, Dark Knight Rises is one of the greats.
I think it's incredible.
Yeah. It's up there, and then he follows out with Interstellar,
which I think is incredible.
I vary with you on that one. I don't think it's.
I think it's an incredible movie.
But a lot of people are still curious about Nolan because no matter how you feel about his films, there's no doubt he delivers on spectacle. He delivers on interesting storytelling and a unique vision. And he was doing something that he announced back in, I believe, 2015 when this came out. He was doing a war movie, just another diverge into different genres that he goes into as a director. He initially his first film was a noir. His Batman trilogy, obviously superhero movies, but still like crime dramas in the same vein. Inception was like fantasy meets crime, and of course, Interstellar science fiction. Now we're seeing Nolan doing a war movie. What is that going to look like? And of course, he delivers Dunkirk, which I contend is one of the best war movies ever made, in my honest opinion. This is a movie that has transcended anything that, to me, Nolan has ever made besides The Dark Knight originally. And I think that, it's kind of a comeback in many ways. I know a lot of people don't feel good about Dunkirk, particularly the way it handles his characters and not a lot of speaking in this movie. But that's why I admire more about this. To me, Nolan is a director who, when he's directing, he's the greatest working, no doubt. When he's a writer, I can't really connect to what the words that his characters are saying. I just think, a lot of dialogue and exposition just doesn't feel real in a Nolan movie. But Dunkirk has little to no dialogue, so it's exactly everything I want from Nolan. But it's like I'm getting my cake and eating it too. You know what I mean? So I think Dunkirk is a film that's going to live on for a very, very long time, and to me that is why he is my number 1 pick for highest 2017.
Yeah, he almost made my list, man, because I do agree with almost everything you said, because Nolan is I can't talk enough about the guy. I think he's a master.
Yeah.
It's incredible because I do feel like it's crazy walking into Interstellar. My incredibly low expectations were thankfully shattered because I enjoyed the crap out of that movie, and I know a lot of people didn't, which is fine. I understand why. But the thing about Dunkirk that I feel like, at the end of the day, no matter what, is, like I just talked about with Patty Jenkins, box office success. And say what you will, you can say, oh well, Nolan blah 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 with Batman, or Nolan blah blah blah. No, Nolan was like, I'm just gonna make a war movie. If you want to see it, come see it, and people went to see it. Like
Yeah.
that thing made money, man, and it made money 100%, and I mean 100% off Nolan's back.
Yeah.
Not off the actors in the movie, not off the incredible story in the movie about blah 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 hero. No, no, no. It's about the director.
Yeah.
And that's so rare nowadays. In fact, it's almost entirely unheard of that people will, tons of people, and not just like people, but just a lot of people, not just film fans, but general movie going audiences will go watch a movie because of the director, not because of what story he's telling, or what actor is in the movie, or who he's working with, or what kind of dynamic he has. It's 100% that movie made all its money off the back of Christopher Nolan.
Yeah.
And that to me is like enough to be on my list. He slightly didn't make it in my list, but I 100% agree with that, in the sense that he is such a masterful director that he's able to bridge the gap between film fans and artists, and film artist fans and stuff
Yeah.
like that, where it comes to critics and stuff, to general movie going audiences who appreciate his ambition. And he is one of the most ambitious, if not the most ambitious director working in Hollywood today.
Yeah, and we talk about ambitious storytelling. I mean, you watch Dunkirk, and Nolan even admits this himself, and it's an experimental movie. It's an experimental piece. It's borderline. Talk about Our House earlier. It's borderline Our House, the way it's constructed, the timing, the editing. I mean, did you ever get around to
Yeah,
seeing
I did
Dunkirk?
see it.
Yeah,
Yeah. I think the thing that threw the people off the most was the time thing.
Yeah, yeah.
Because it cuts from like one thing going on in one time, and it immediately cuts back to you're not entirely sure like
Yeah.
when is this happening, because
Yeah.
you see certain characters in other times.
Yeah.
So I think that's what threw people off the most, and I know what you're saying with that too.
Yeah, and I mean, to me, I love that. I love the fact that people are thrown off, don't really get what's happening, and it's part of what makes that movie work so well for me is that it's like an optical illusion. He's manipulating the structure and the time and the way we perceive time as cinema goers. The fact that he's able to manipulate that and make that so vivid and so like powerful. And what is it? The stuff on the ground takes place over the course of 1 week. Stuff on the boat takes place over the course of 1 day, and then the stuff in the air takes place over 1 hour. So when you're cutting back and forth, you really don't have any idea what's happening. But again, to me, that's what makes more the fact that I have to think about this movie, have to analyze it, but still I'm getting swallowed by the experience. Watching it in IMAX 70 millimeter was like whoa, because it really was like you were transported onto this beach, or you were flying with Tom Hardy up there. So
Shout out to Tom Hardy, man. That guy was a hero.
Yeah. Mark Rylance was great in that as well.
Rylance, yeah.
Henry Styles.
Cillian Murphy.
Cillian Murphy.
Yeah.
Cillian Murphy having, and again, it's not a movie with like a lot of characters, but Cillian Murphy had one of the most interesting like.
His arc was so, I wouldn't say odd, but it was almost kind of odd.
Yeah.
In the sense that I was thinking about it the other day, because I recently watched Dunkirk, and I was like, he wasn't like a guy that you particularly didn't like, but at the same time you were like, I don't know how to feel about him, because he obviously he did something in the movie. I don't want to spoil the movie because you haven't seen it, even though it's been a while. But where you were like, oh, that sucks. But it's obviously not his intention to do that. But at the same time, he never apologized for it either.
Yeah.
So, and how at the end of the movie, he just
Yeah.
kind of walks away, and the
Yeah.
kid just kind of like looks for him, like, where'd that douchebag go?
Yeah.
And you're like, it sucks, because you're like, man, I wouldn't know how to feel in that situation if I'm a soldier who's getting bombed by the Nazis, every day, and
You're dealing with like these real human, stuff, like
life or death circumstances. Maybe I would be like, screw everyone too, but I don't know. I just don't know, and it's very interesting on that front. Also, I want to talk about like, I saw so many freaking like hardcore like British movies this year.
Yeah.
Considering Darkest Hour and considering Dunkirk.
Yeah.
And it's crazy how I don't know if you've seen Darkest
I
Hour.
haven't seen Darkest Hour.
But
no.
Darkest Hour is about Dunkirk.
Right. Oh, really?
So it's
Okay.
such an interesting like double feature, considering it's all about Churchill and people telling him what to do and stuff like that, and what's going to happen, and telling him the situation in Dunkirk, and how he's like trying to stay like strong and not surrender to the Nazis or whatever, because everyone's like, dude, you have to surrender. We literally have all our men on that beach.
Yeah.
They're all gonna die. If you don't surrender, we're all gonna die. And how he was like, how about we just have civilians take their boats to the beaches? And everyone's like, that's the stupidest thing I've ever heard. And it worked, dude. Like
Yeah.
it's interesting to see that in the movie itself. Like they
Yeah.
don't show it happen in Darkest Hour,
Yeah.
but they show it in Dunkirk. And it's so interesting because when you first hear that, it's like that's how dire the situation was.
Yeah.
And seeing how Christopher Nolan, being a British man himself, wanted to make a very historical movie that can stay with you, not just on a storytelling perspective, but on a purely historical perspective, which is what I feel like Dunkirk does.
Right.
As far as it gives you that historical retelling of what an awful situation in British history was like.
Right.
And that
right.
to me is just phenomenal in that sense as well.
Right. Right.
And it's crazy because there's so many moments in this movie where people are drowning and I'm dying. I'm like, no, I don't want to drown. No, that's so awful. Like you can just feel like I remember going into this movie and people saying like, I can't believe it's going to be rated PG-13. It's not going to
Yeah.
be rated R. Where's the gore at? You know,
Yeah.
Saving Private Ryan, we're kind of used to that, right?
Right.
You don't need gore, man.
Yeah,
Drowning
no.
is gore enough for me.
Well, I mean, you don't need gore because like the suspense is not whether you're gonna see somebody get their head blown off.
Yeah.
You want to see these characters survive.
Yeah,
And, like,
because you don't want him to drown. Because
Yeah.
drowning's awful. That
Yeah.
that stuff is so bad. It's one of the worst ways to go. And it's like seeing people like going through that or almost going through that in this movie is terrifying enough. That's enough
Right.
of a rated R for me.
Right.
Just on the
right.
tension of it, right? And also that goes on the score as well. Cause
Oh, the score is magnificent.
Yeah.
Hans Zimmer. It is probably one of his best soundtracks. And
and it does the typical Christopher Nolan like increase volume.
Yeah.
And then it's
Well,
like super loud and then it's like super quiet.
it's super instant because you don't really. It's hard. Sometimes you can't even distinguish what score and what sound effects because
Sure.
it's just so. And I think a lot of people compare it to a silent film, obviously because there's not a lot of dialogue. But the use of sound in this movie is like next level because that's what really amps it up. And they even have the whole thing where they're putting a ticking clock under the entire movie the entire time just to like keep the tension riding. That's like it's really fascinating sound design that I would have never thought of. And it's and just I mean the way I mean that whole opening scene where they have to carry a body on the boat to like make sure they had like that was crazy suspenseful.
That pissed, dude. I can't lie, that pissed me off so much. 'Cause I know you just literally talked about it being a silent film.
Yeah.
And the whole time I'm watching that scene because I didn't watch the Dunkirk in theaters. I watched it at home.
Yeah.
So I was able to yell at the TV like I
Yeah.
usually do. And the whole time I'm thinking, I'm like, if you're carrying a body and you're trying to get past people, you're gonna scream your head off. You're gonna be like, move, move, and no, they're just like. And I'm just you can't even say excuse me or get out of the way. Like, oh dude, but that was part of the experience. I get it. That was
Yeah.
part of it. It's like you just said, like an art style film of making
Yeah.
it silent film in dire situations. Where normally, if you were watching a normal war movie, you would hear guys being like, move, get out of the way, like just
Yeah.
screaming. And in this one, you just see guys like just running with
Yeah,
with
I kind of interpreted that as they didn't want people to see the body, so like other people might take their body and take the.
Oh, I didn't feel that at all because they were just like they were kind of helping.
They helped towards the end, yeah.
So
yeah,
I was like,
yeah.
dude, scream!
yeah.
But they didn't scream at all. But I was fine with that.
Yeah.
But yeah, man, I 100% agree with your. It's a good number one because he did transcend his usual story, I guess you can say. It wasn't just like a crazy sci-fi space movie or a Batman movie. It was like, no, I'm just making like a silent war movie.
And it would have been easy to put somebody in like Denis Villeneuve or like Ryan Johnson, guys who we're both fans of, and we've done an entire podcast about. And they had that big budget thing. I mean, I shouldn't have brought up those two because I don't like their movies, unfortunately. But
I do.
You do, and I think the world does, and they do have a kind of impact. But I want to recognize Nolan because he has had a continuous line of being just one of the best directors working and like not flopping, and his audience always following him no matter where he goes. And then when he makes like this crazy experimental art piece that is Dunkirk, that is still able to be successful and be really well done. So
Absolutely.
none but salutes to Mr. Nolan.
Absolutely, man. I love Nolan. My number one is a guy who was able to take. I mean, it's gonna be a lot of people's number ones as far as like top 10 lists and all that for movies.
Yeah.
But he was a guy who was able to take a tiny budget small expectations and his first film and make it a phenomenon, and that is Jordan Peele.
Oh yeah.
Jordan Peele is my number one director of 2017. I feel like what he was able to do as far as making one of the most profitable movies of all time, if not the most profitable movie of all time when it comes to budget to box office success, considering it had like a $4 million budget and it made like, I don't know, 250, 300 mil worldwide, which is insane. It's one of the best returns for a movie that has ever been in the history of
Right.
movies and its history of box office. And at the same time, make one of the most critically well accepted movies and still make it a mainstream, successful conversation starter type movie of 2017 is so phenomenal. The fact that he was able to make a horror movie that seemed to be targeted at a very specific audience and at a very specific moment in time and kind of make it tongue in cheek, kind of wink, wink, quirky, and throw away all those things and make it a serious, dark horror movie that everyone could enjoy and everyone felt and everyone appreciated and everyone can feel the stakes of it. It's just, I can't talk enough about Get Out and how it delivered on so many fronts, whether it's originality, whether it's incredibly well directed, whether it's the fact that it stirred up so much interest and conversation, and it made things in the movie now become mainstream. The sunken place, like literally, my buddy made a joke the other day about the sunken place now, and that's a joke that now everyone can get
Right.
because everyone has seen this movie. That's the type of stuff that you don't see from tiny little horror movies
Yeah.
or tiny little independent movies that come out early in the year. And that's the type of success that this guy has gotten. He's gotten success to the point that he's made stuff that is kind of ingrained in us now, whether it comes to social media, whether it comes to normal conversations, whether it comes to identity. All that type of stuff is what Jordan Peele delivered with Get Out. And to me, it's just, we haven't even seen the tip of the iceberg yet. I almost guarantee, and I know this might be my bias talking as far as my love of this movie, but I almost guarantee that this movie is going to clean up in award season. Like, clean up. Everyone's like, Shape of Water and this, and I, Tanya. I guarantee Get Out's going to blow people's minds. It's going to start taking awards that a lot of people are like, well, I'm happy I got a nomination, and start winning those awards.
Yeah.
Because I do feel like it's one of the best movies of the year that everyone can appreciate and that hit so many types of people in so many different levels on so many different aspects, right? Whether it's like you saw it a different way that I saw it versus another person, and we all still appreciated it in a different way. And that to me is so unique and so original. And what Jordan Peele delivered with that is just timeless. And it really is going to stand the test of time,
Yeah.
considering its success on every single front that I identified in the beginning of this podcast, whether it's artistic vision, box office success, and impact on 2017, cultural impact, conversation impact, and just a telling of the times, because the times we live in now and the structure of our society that it is now, this is probably the most relevant movie of 2017.
Oh yeah, without a doubt, without a doubt. And you gotta show none but respect for Jordan Peele and what he's able to do, coming off of a hit TV show like Key and Peele, mainly being known for comedy and doing, of course, Keanu, which is another comedy movie, kind of like their feature debut of the two. But having Get Out represent what it gets out, having Get Out represents what we've gotten out of 2017, right? How the energy, the way people feel about each other is kind of all expressed throughout and Get Out. And and I think that's what's really powerful. I mean, you talk about it being timeless in the sense that its style and the way that it's shot and the way that's is going to feel like it's been around forever and it's going to be around forever. But it's also incredibly relevant. This, if you take 2017, kind of put in a microcosm, you pretty much put in Get Out, Wonder Woman, and Lady Bird. Those three are pretty much what speaks to the modern times that we're in right now. So prominently, even though Lady Bird takes place in 2002 and Wonder Woman takes place in World War One, but we still get those same ideas of of representation of the maybe the oppressed finally coming up to tell their stories, have their voices, bring something unique to the table and bring something new. Because throughout all these years throughout the hundreds of years that we've had horror movies, there hasn't been anything that was made for African American audiences. It was made for Black people. And I talk about this a lot, but one of the reasons why I love Get Out is because it kind of pokes fun very, very lightly, but to me, I could clearly tell it's like poking fun at things that black people are just like, come on, man, don't why are you not running here? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like they're or like anything that like a black stereotype in the movie is very clear in other movies, and to me, it's very clear when they're poking fun at that. So I think they're doing that really well here. So, and again, like you said, you got multiple interpretations on it. I consider it a horror comedy. You consider it more of a straight up horror thriller kind of deal, and obviously the Golden Globes consider it just a comedy. But it's it is what it is. But I think that having mixing genres that it does so well, even if you don't consider it a horror comedy or a comedy, it still has really funny moments in it. And that's just the skill of having somebody like Jordan Peele, who comes from a comedy background, but the whole idea of comedy is timing and it's pacing. And this movie is impeccable when it comes to pacing. So tight, so like fresh, and you still get moments of levity and a moment to breathe and whatnot here. And even that big dramatic moment at the end is paid off with a laugh to kind of leave you going home, satisfied. So again, there's just nothing but greatness in this movie. I'm so glad that Jordan Peele has had the opportunity. I mean, I talked about D. Reeves earlier, but Jordan Peele doing his thing with this, and now he's doing a Spike Lee film about, I can't remember, it's an adaptation of a book, but it's basically like the undercover KKK.
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
He was doing
yeah.
that.
Yeah. I think he's just producing. I think Spike's actually directing, but
Oh, okay.
still, the fact that Jordan Peele is producing a Spike Lee movie is pretty remarkable. Spike Lee's been around over 30 years, and he's still, and I think that just goes to speak for the talent. When you talk about the hottest, that's the definition of the hottest, right? When you climb up to the top, and you're about to, I think he's going to get a Best Director nomination. Clearly, best screenplay is gonna.
I think it's gonna get more, dude. I'm telling
Yeah.
you. I'm a little bit bold in my predictions, but I think it's gonna win some stuff.
Really.
I think it might win some
Now
stuff.
we're gonna have an Oscar episode.
We are.
I think so.
We are.
We're gonna talk about. But there's a lot of great directed movies that came out in 2017. But the fact is that Get Out, even though it came out in February, is still on the tip of everybody's tongue, and it's February. We're in July, and we're in January right now. Almost over a year ago, this movie comes out, and we're still talking about it. It's still one of the most highest rated. I think it read somewhere like is one of the highest viewed things on HBO recently. Like that's crazy. So again, nothing but love for Get Out, man.
Yeah, and the fact that it caused so much conversation, and the fact that it was such a societal reference film, like a type of movie that you can point to 2017 and say, yeah,
Oh, yeah,
that's that year in a nutshell. Let's Get Out.
Yeah.
Like the fact that it's such a conversation starter. It's such a, like, for internet culture, it's such a meme starter. It's such a
Oh,
GIF
yeah,
starter.
without
It's such a
doubt.
like inside joke. It's such like it's a type of movie that you can feel on so many different fronts when it comes to. Everyone gets that reference. Everyone gets that feeling. Everyone gets the joke. Everyone gets like the whole like good to see you, man type thing.
Yeah,
And that's like
yeah.
now on a billboard. That's like literally like that's iconic. The sunken place is iconic.
Yeah,
Like all
yeah.
these types of things that you would get probably in like mainstream Star Wars movie is now coming into the mainstream through an indie film, through an indie horror film by a director that's a first-time director. That to me is just like spectacular. The fact that you could say The Sunken Place and that as many people or almost as many people would get it as saying The Force, to me is just like, dude, that's nuts. That to me is impact in a nutshell.
Well, even the whole running thing, like the running challenge,
running thing,
literally
yeah.
became a
The
giant
Get Out
meme.
challenge.
Yeah, the Get Out challenge.
Yeah.
You could say that, and people are just automatically going to know the running gifs and stuff like that. So
And the fact that, like, I really do feel like it should be said too that like, the fact that so many people got this movie too.
Yeah.
That it wasn't just like one audience got it or another audience got it, but like I said previously in our Spielberg episode, so many different types of audiences got it. Whether it was my family, whether it was my friends from work who are mainly white,
Right.
they got this movie and they felt this movie on so many different levels, and
Yeah.
it's just a damn good movie.
Yeah.
Like no matter what you say, it's a damn good movie, and that's all Jordan Peele.
Yeah.
Obviously Daniel Kaluuya too, because I do feel like he's not enough people are talking about him, and more
Yeah.
people will talk about him, considering he's nominated for a SAG Award as well for Best Actor,
Mm-hmm.
but and also for obviously what happened at the Golden Globes. But it's one of those things where he was able to perfectly craft every single aspect of this movie. Because dude, the
Right.
score too is phenomenal. Not
Yeah.
enough people are talking about that score.
That
That score
little
is
like
great.
banjo
Yeah,
like set.
that when they're driving and you see the trees and stuff, the
Yeah.
opening of the film.
Dun, 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 dun,
Yeah.
dun. Yeah. That's
That to
nice.
me is great, and that's all coming from Jordan Peele. Where the cuts, the moments. Watch if I recommend one thing, if you own this movie or if you don't. First of all, go buy this movie. Second of all, listen to the director's commentary. I don't know if you've had.
I haven't heard
It's
that. No.
dude, when you get inside the brain of Jordan Peele and listen to the director's commentary, it's mind blowing.
Yeah.
It's so good because every single moment, every single detail that you feel would be like, that was probably just like a day in production type of thing. No, it was
Right.
all purposeful, super purposeful, and that's to me is the true telling of a creative genius, and that's what he proved to be this year, and that's why he's my number one
Yeah.
of 2017
Right.
directors.
Right.
Yeah,
so
man.
kind of running down the list. I had Nolan number 1, D. Reeves number 2, Greta Gerwig is my number 3, James Gunn number 4, and of course number 5 was the one and only, and I'm forgetting their name at this very moment, the Suffer Brothers, the Safdie brothers.
I will
Safdie
always
brothers.
forget their name. Well,
Yeah.
I won't always forget it, but
It's-
I always forget
It's
it.
spelled funny. When I heard the name, I thought it was the Sappy brothers, like Sappy. So it's Safdie. Yeah.
And my 1 through 5 is obviously Jordan Peele, Patty Jenkins at number 2. At number 3, I put Machete. At number 4, I put Greta Gerwig. At number 5, it's Mr. Taika Waititi.
Right.
So,
we had a pretty
a good
great
list,
year.
man.
Pretty great year in cinema. We had a couple
Yeah.
overlaps too. So
We did have a couple of overlaps.
Yeah.
Overall, we agree with our list. We
Yeah.
don't have the exact same on every front.
yeah.
But for the most part, I agree with your list in the sense of like I could see that being a top 5.
Right.
So-
Right.
Yeah. All right, man. That was our podcast. That was the meaning of podcast for this episode. Let us know what is your top 5 directors based on these type of criteria that we're looking for in this episode. And let us know in the comments down below, what was your favorite movie of 2017? What are your favorite directors of 2017? We're going to be here reading your comments because we appreciate your comments, guys. And that was this episode of the Meaning of Podcast. Make sure you're listening next week as well. I'm Ace,
This is RB3.
and we are peacing out.